The final battle began not with weapons or explosions, but with music. As the swarm fleet emerged from the darkness between stars, filling space around Earth with thousands of writhing biomechanical ships, James Washington sat at his modified piano aboard the Eternal Dawn and began to play a song that had never existed before. The melody flowed through the ship's communication systems and into the psychic networks that now connected human and Veltar minds across 17 star systems. Within seconds, millions of voices joined the improvisation. Children on Earth hummed along with warriors on distant Veltar colonies. Scientists added mathematical harmonies, while artists contributed visual rhythms that somehow became audible. Marcus stood in the command center, his consciousness partially merged with the growing symphony of allied minds. Through his bond with Zarathus, he could feel the swarm's confusion as they encountered something their vast collective intelligence had never experienced. Music that followed no rules but created beauty. Thoughts that defied logic but conveyed truth. Emotions that contradicted each other but somehow harmonized. "The Chaos Protocol is working," Science Minister Ulaneth reported. "Swarm coordination is decreasing by 12% across all their formations." But Marcus could sense something deeper happening. The swarm was not just being confused by the chaotic transmissions. They were trying to absorb them, to add human creativity and Veltar psychic unity to their collective consciousness. The problem was that true creativity could not be simply consumed and replicated. It had to be lived, experienced, felt in ways that the swarm's hive mind was not designed to handle. They're overloading, Marcus realized. They're trying to process every creative thought simultaneously, but they can't separate individual experiences from collective knowledge. Admiral Kethvar was coordinating the physical battle as swarm bioships engaged the combined Earth-Veltar fleet. The enemy vessels were like living nightmares, constantly shifting and adapting to whatever weapons were used against them. Traditional tactics were useless against opponents that could literally evolve new defenses within minutes. But the human volunteers had prepared for this too. Instead of following established battle plans, each ship's crew was improvising their responses in real time. Dr. Anderson, now serving as a tactical coordinator aboard a Veltar battlecruiser, was treating the space battle like a massive game with her kindergarten students. Their innocent suggestions, amplified through psychic networks, created battle strategies that no military computer could predict. "Enemy ship approaching from Sector 7, reported a Veltar weapons officer. "Let's play hide-and-seek with it," suggested 6-year-old Emma Chen, Marcus's niece who had somehow ended up aboard the battlecruiser despite all safety protocols. Her idea, translated through Dr. Anderson's tactical expertise, resulted in the Veltar ship literally hiding behind an asteroid and then surprising the swarm vessel with an attack from an impossible angle. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human creativity merged with alien technology in ways that defied both species' understanding of warfare. Akiko Tanaka was painting battle formations in real time, her artistic intuition somehow predicting swarm movements better than advanced sensors. A group of Earth musicians were composing victory songs before battles were won, their confidence somehow making the victories real. But Marcus knew that the physical battle was only a distraction. The real war was being fought in the realm of consciousness itself, where his unique neural patterns had become the focal point of a struggle between order and chaos, collective intelligence and individual creativity. The swarm's central consciousness reached out to him directly, speaking through the quantum foam that connected all minds in the galaxy. Its voice was like the whisper of dying stars, ancient beyond measure and hungry for the new patterns it sensed in his thoughts. "You are the anomaly," the swarm said without words. "The pattern that breaks patterns. We will consume your uniqueness and become more than we have ever been." Marcus felt the full weight of the swarm's collective attention focusing on him. Trillions of absorbed minds from countless civilizations pressed against his consciousness, trying to understand what made him different. The pressure was overwhelming, threatening to crush his individual identity beneath the weight of so much accumulated knowledge. But then he felt something else. Through his bond with Zarathus, he sensed not just her support, but the support of every human and Veltar mind connected to their network. They were not trying to maintain his individual identity by isolating it. Instead, they were celebrating it by adding their own uniqueness to the mix. Sarah's stubborn determination to protect her little brother. General Hayes's calm professionalism, mixed with her secret love of romantic poetry. James Washington's musical genius combined with his fear of performing in front of crowds. Dr. Anderson's infinite patience with children balanced by her fierce protectiveness when they were threatened. Thousands, then millions of individual perspectives flowed through the network. Each one distinct, each one irreplaceable, each one contributing something that no collective intelligence could replicate through simple absorption. Marcus felt, his consciousness expanding not by being consumed but by being shared. He was still himself, but he was also connected to everyone who had chosen to stand with him against the darkness. The swarm's collective voice, so vast and ancient, suddenly seemed small by comparison. "You don't understand," Marcus told the swarm across the quantum void. "You think consciousness is about gathering knowledge and processing information, but that's not what makes us alive. What makes us alive is the ability to surprise ourselves, to create something that never existed before, to love someone who is completely different from us." He opened his mind fully to the swarm's probe, but instead of allowing them to absorb his patterns, he flooded their collective consciousness with pure human experience. Not just his own, but the combined emotional and creative essence of everyone connected to the network. The effect was catastrophic for the swarm. Their hive mind, evolved over millions of years to process and integrate absorbed knowledge, could not handle the chaotic flood of individual experiences. Joy mixed with sorrow, love battled with fear, hope danced with despair. Logical thought patterns dissolved into creative chaos as the swarm tried desperately to maintain their collective coherence. Across the battlefield, swarm bioships began to falter as their controlling intelligence became overwhelmed by contradictory inputs. Some vessels started fighting each other as different absorbed personalities reasserted themselves. Others, simply, stopped functioning as their crew minds became lost in experiencing individual emotions for the first time in millions of years. But Marcus was not finished. Drawing on the strength of every allied mind in the network, he pushed deeper into the swarm's collective consciousness. There, at the very core of their being, he found something unexpected. Not malevolent intelligence, but profound loneliness. The swarm had absorbed so many civilizations over the eons that they had forgotten what it felt like to be truly individual. They consumed not out of evil, but out of a desperate hunger to fill an emptiness that could never be satisfied through conquest alone. "You don't have to be alone," Marcus offered, his thoughts carrying the warmth of every friendship he had ever known, every moment of connection between different beings who chose to understand each other rather than consume each other. For a moment that lasted forever, the entire galaxy held its breath. The swarm's vast intelligence wrestled with concepts it had not considered for millions of years. The possibility of coexistence instead of consumption. The idea that difference could be celebrated rather than eliminated. The radical notion that consciousness could grow through sharing rather than absorption. When the moment ended, the change was visible across all of space. The swarm bioships began to separate, each one developing its own distinct characteristics as absorbed personalities reasserted their individuality. Some ships moved away from Earth and the Veltar territories, seeking new purposes in the galaxy. Others approached cautiously, transmitting peaceful intentions for the first time in their existence. The collective voice that had spoken to Marcus was replaced by thousands of individual voices, each one representing a civilization that had thought itself lost forever. They spoke in languages that had been silent for eons, shared knowledge that had been trapped in the collective for millennia, and began the long process of remembering what it meant to be themselves. Marcus found himself back in the command center of the Eternal Dawn, exhausted but alive. Around him, the crew was celebrating the end of the battle, but he could barely focus on their joy. The experience of touching the swarm's consciousness had changed him in ways he was still discovering. Zarathus moved to his side, her forearms embracing him with gentle strength. Through their bond, he felt her pride, her relief, and her love. but also her understanding that both of them had been transformed by what they had experienced. "The galaxy will never be the same," she said softly. Marcus nodded, looking at the displays that showed ships from dozens of different species working together to help former swarm vessels establish their new independence. Human children were teak. Marcus had been aboard the Eternal Dawn for 3 days when he discovered that the Veltar Empire was dying. It happened by accident while he was trying to understand the ship's communication system. Zarathes had given him access to what she called the knowledge networks, expecting him to spend weeks learning basic galactic history. Instead, Marcus found himself able to navigate the complex data streams in ways that surprised even the ship's artificial intelligence. The truth was buried in economic reports and military assessments that painted a grim picture. The Veltar Empire controlled 17 star systems, but they were losing ground every year. Their rigid caste system meant that only certain bloodlines could become military commanders, scientists, or administrators. Innovation had slowed to a crawl because new ideas had to pass through layers of bureaucracy that could take decades to approve changes. Marcus found Zarathes in what she called her meditation chamber, a spherical room where she floated in the center surrounded by holographic displays of her empire. Her forearms moved in complex patterns, managing data streams that would have overwhelmed a dozen human analysts. Through their bond, he could feel her exhaustion. "You look tired," he said, though he knew she would sense his concern before he spoke the words. "The Nexus Collective took another mining colony yesterday," she replied without opening her eyes. "The third one this month. Our admirals followed the same defensive strategy they have used for 2 centuries. The Nexus predicted every move." Marcus studied the tactical displays floating around her. The battle formations looked elegant but predictable. He had played enough strategy games to recognize patterns, and these patterns were so rigid they might as well have been painted on the hull of every Veltar ship. "Why don't you try something different?" he asked. Zarathes opened her eyes, and he felt her mixture of amusement and frustration. Different how? These formations were perfected over millennia of warfare. They maximize our psychic coordination abilities while minimizing casualties. But they also tell your enemies exactly what you're going to do, Marcus pointed out. "What if you did something that didn't make sense?" Before she could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The meditation chamber's walls shifted from peaceful blue to urgent red. Admiral Kethavar's voice filled the space through the communication system. "Your Majesty, we have multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace. Nexus collective battle formations, approaching from 3 vectors. They are moving to intercept our supply convoy to the Altair colonies." Zarathes was already moving, her robes shifting to what Marcus had learned were command colors. "How long until intercept?" 17 minutes at current velocity, came the reply. "Our escort ships are following defensive pattern Theta 7 as per standing orders." Marcus watched the tactical display update to show the approaching enemy fleet. The Nexus ships looked like geometric crystals that hurt to look at directly. Their formation was mathematically perfect, designed to counter defensive pattern Theta 7 with surgical precision. "They know exactly how you're going to respond," Marcus said. Zarathes paused in her preparations. Through their bond, he felt her considering his words. "What would you suggest?" Marcus stared at the display, thinking about all the war movies he had watched, all the games he had played, all the history books he had read about battles won through unconventional tactics. What if you pretended to retreat but actually attacked? Or split your forces in a way that looks like a mistake but isn't? "Our formations require precise psychic coordination," Zarathes explained. "If we deviate from established patterns, our crews become confused and ineffective." "Then don't tell them the real plan," Marcus said. "Tell them one thing but mean something else." The idea clearly disturbed her. Veltar culture valued honesty and direct communication. Deception was considered a weakness, a tool of lesser beings. But through their bond, Marcus could feel her desperation. The Empire was losing ships and people every day, and traditional methods were not working. "Admiral Kethavar," she said finally, "prepare to execute defensive pattern Theta 7 as ordered." However, be ready for my direct tactical commands during the engagement. Marcus followed her to the command center, a vast spherical chamber where dozens of Veltar officers manage the ship's operations. Their minds were linked together in a network that allowed them to react with inhuman speed and precision. It was beautiful to watch, but also predictable. Every action flowed from established doctrine. The Nexus fleet approached exactly as their computers had calculated. Their crystalline ships moved in formations that looked like living geometry, each vessel positioned to maximize their energy weapons while minimizing exposure to return fire. They had fought the Veltar so many times that this battle was more mathematics than warfare. Enemy fleet in weapons range, Admiral Kethvar reported. Beginning defensive pattern Theta 7. The Veltar ships responded exactly as they had been trained. The escorts moved to shield the supply ships while the battle cruisers took positions, designed to force the enemy into a prolonged engagement. It was textbook perfect and exactly what the Nexus expected. Marcus watched the enemy formation adjust to counter the Veltar moves. Through the ship's sensors, he could see the mathematical precision of their response. Every Nexus ship knew where every Veltar ship would be at any given moment. Now, he whispered to Zarathes, do something they don't expect. Zarathes closed her eyes and reached out through the psychic command network. But instead of following established patterns, she began giving orders that made no tactical sense. She told 3 battle cruisers to break formation and retreat at maximum speed. She ordered the supply ships to advance toward the enemy instead of fleeing. She commanded the remaining escorts to scatter in different directions as if their coordination had completely failed. The effect was immediate and chaotic. The Veltar crews, trained to follow orders without question, obeyed despite their confusion. To any observer, it looked like the Veltar fleet was falling apart under pressure. The Nexus fleet's response was equally immediate. Their formation shifted to pursue what they perceived as fleeing ships, while positioning themselves to destroy the apparently defenseless supply vessels. Their mathematical minds calculated an easy victory and moved to claim it. That was when Zarathes sprang her trap. The retreating battlecruisers had not fled in random directions but had positioned themselves to attack the Nexus fleet from behind. The advancing supply ships revealed hidden weapons and began targeting the enemy's command vessels. The scattered escorts regrouped and struck at the Nexus formation's weak points, which had been exposed when they moved to exploit the apparent Veltar collapse. What had looked like defeat became victory in a matter of minutes. The Nexus fleet, caught completely off guard by tactics that violated everything they knew about Veltar warfare, found themselves surrounded and outmaneuvered. 3 of their largest ships were destroyed before they could adapt, and the rest retreated in confusion. The command center erupted in surprise celebration, but Marcus could feel Zarathes's mixed emotions through their bond. Victory was sweet, but it had come through methods that went against everything her people valued. Admiral Kethvar approached them, his expression troubled. Your Majesty, that was the most effective engagement we have had against the Nexus in years. But it was also completely contrary to our military doctrine. How did you know it would work? Marcus spoke before Zarathes could answer. Because sometimes the best way to win is to look like you're losing. The Nexus are so focused on mathematical perfection that they can't adapt when someone breaks the rules. Science Minister Yulaneth, who had been monitoring the battle from the research section, joined them. The humans' assessment is correct. The Nexus battle computers are designed to counter known Veltar tactics. When we deviated from established patterns, their prediction algorithms failed catastrophically. But spiritual guide Morthus looked deeply concerned. This victory came through deception and misdirection. We achieved success by abandoning the principles that define us as Veltar. What does this say about who we are becoming? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus could feel the crew's conflicted emotions. They were proud of their victory but uncertain about the methods used to achieve it. Change was never easy, especially for a civilization built on tradition and honor. Maybe being Veltar doesn't have to mean losing, Marcus said quietly. Maybe it can mean being smart enough to survive. Before anyone could respond, new alarms began sounding. This time it was Science Minister Ulaneth who brought the emergency report. Your Majesty, our deep space sensors have detected something unprecedented. A massive energy signature is approaching from the galactic rim. The pattern matches historical records of only one thing. Zarathus went very still. Show me. The main display shifted to show a long-range sensor reading. What Marcus saw looked like a storm made of darkness, moving between the stars at impossible speed. Even through the sensors, it radiated a sense of hunger that made him shiver. The swarm, Zarathus whispered. They have been dormant for 3,000 years, but something has awakened them. Marcus felt her fear through their bond, deeper and more primal than anything he had. Marcus had never imagined that making contact with Earth would be the easy part. The quantum communication array aboard the Eternal Dawn could reach his home planet instantly across the vast distance of space. The hard part was convincing anyone to believe what they were hearing. He sat in the ship's communication chamber staring at a display that showed his sister Sarah's face frozen in shock. Behind her, he could see the familiar walls of the International Space Command headquarters in Geneva, where she worked as a communications coordinator. Around her, a growing crowd of officials and scientists pressed closer to hear every word. Let me get this straight, Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. My brother, who went to study bacteria on a research station, is now calling me from an alien spaceship to tell me he's married to their queen and that something called the Swarm is coming to eat Earth in 6 months. That's a very accurate summary, Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Through his bond with Zarathus, he could feel her amusement at the situation, but also her concern. The fate of billions depended on this conversation. General Morrison, the director of the International Space Command, pushed forward to the screen. Marcus remembered him from news broadcasts, a stern man who had spent his career preparing humanity for theoretical alien contact. The reality seemed to be overwhelming him. Dr. Chen, we need proof, Morrison said. Anyone could claim to be calling from space. Show us something that proves you're really out there. Marcus looked at Zarathus, who nodded and moved into the camera's view. The reaction from Earth was immediate. Sarah gasped and stepped backward. Several officials started talking at once in different languages. Someone in the background was clearly praying. I am Zarathus, Queen of the Veltar Empire, she said, her musical voice carrying easily through the communication system. Your brother speaks the truth about our bond and about the threat approaching your world. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, Earth's chief xenobiologist and Marcus's former mentor, squeezed into view of the camera. Her scientific curiosity seemed to be overcoming her shock. The physiological differences are remarkable. Dr. Chen, how is communication even possible between such different species? It's complicated, Marcus began, but he was interrupted by alarms sounding throughout the Eternal Dawn. Admiral Kethvar's voice echoed through the ship. Your Majesty, we have incoming ships. Multiple fleets approaching from different vectors. I'm reading Nexus Collective, Machine Hegemony, and unidentified signatures. Zarathus was already moving toward the command center. Dr. Chen, we must continue this conversation later. It appears that news of our communication with Earth has attracted unwanted attention. The screen went dark, leaving Earth's leadership staring at empty space. Marcus could imagine the chaos that would follow, but there was no time to worry about it now. The ship was moving to battle stations, and through his bond, he could feel Zarathus shifting into full command mode. In the command center, the tactical displays showed a situation that made Marcus's stomach clench. 3 separate fleets were approaching, each from a different direction. The Nexus Collective ships looked like moving crystals as always, but the Machine Hegemony vessels were something else entirely. They appeared to be built from dark metal that seemed to absorb light, covered in weapons that looked more like surgical instruments than traditional armaments. What are they? Marcus asked. The Machine Hegemony believes that biological life is inefficient, Admiral Kethvar explained while managing defensive preparations. They seek to convert or eliminate all organic species. They have been fighting the Veltar Empire for 800 years. Science Minister Ulaneth was analyzing the Third Fleet. Your Majesty, The unidentified ships appear to be of Zephyrian origin, but the Zephyrians have been neutral in galactic conflicts for over 1,000 years. Marcus studied the approaching fleets. Each one was positioning itself to cut off the Eternal Dawn's escape routes. It was clearly a coordinated effort despite the fact that these three empires were normally enemies of each other. They're working together, he realized. They've put aside their differences because of me. Zarathus nodded grimly. Your existence has disrupted the balance of power in the galaxy. They believe that if they can capture or kill you, they can either gain your abilities or prevent us from using them. The first attack came from the machine hegemony. Their weapons were precise and devastating, designed to disable rather than destroy. They wanted to capture the ship intact. The Eternal Dawn's shields held, but Marcus could feel the strain through his connection to the ship's systems. Traditional defensive patterns will not work against 3 coordinated fleets, Admiral Kethvar reported. We are outnumbered 15-1. Marcus looked at the tactical display, his mind racing. In the games he used to play, situations like this required thinking several moves ahead and using your enemy's strengths against them. What if we don't fight them? He suggested. What if we make them fight each other? Zarathus turned to him with interest. Explain. Marcus pointed to the positions of the 3 fleets. They're cooperating now because they have a common goal, but they still don't trust each other. The Nexus Collective and Machine Hegemony have been enemies for centuries. If we could make them think one was betraying the other, Admiral Kethvar looked skeptical. How do you propose we do that? Marcus was already forming a plan that would have been impossible without his unique position. His human neural patterns, amplified through his bond with Zarathus and transmitted through the ship's communication systems, could create confusion in ways that the enemy fleets could not predict or counter. I need access to their communication networks, he said, not to send messages but to create interference that looks like coded transmissions. Science Minister Yulaneth understood first. You want to make each fleet think the others are sending secret communications. They will suspect betrayal even when none exists. The plan was audacious and would require precise timing. Marcus linked his consciousness with the ship's communication array while Zarathus coordinated with her crew. Through their bond, she could feel his intentions and translate them into actions that her people could understand and execute. The first phase worked perfectly. Marcus generated neural static that, when filtered through the ship's systems, resembled encrypted communications between the Machine Hegemony and Nexus Collective fleets. The Zephyrians detected these apparent transmissions and began to question their allies' motives. At the same time, Marcus created different interference patterns that suggested the Zephyrians were secretly communicating with the Nexus. The Machine Hegemony, paranoid by nature, began to position their ships defensively against both supposed allies. The situation deteriorated rapidly from there. The Nexus Collective, detecting defensive movements from the Machine Hegemony, assumed they were about to be attacked. The Zephyrians, believing they were being excluded from some secret agreement, began to withdraw from optimal attack positions. What should have been a coordinated assault on the Eternal Dawn became a 3-way standoff filled with suspicion and confusion. The enemy fleets were so busy watching each other that they lost focus on their original target. Now we run, Marcus said. The Eternal Dawn engaged its hyperdrive and fled the battle zone before the enemy fleets could reorganize. But as they escaped, Marcus realized something troubling. His plan had worked too well. The 3 fleets were now actively fighting each other, and the battle was spreading to include other ships that had arrived to investigate the disturbance. I've started a war, he said, watching the tactical display show expanding combat across an entire star system. Zarathus placed one of her hands on his shoulder. You have prevented our capture and bought us time to prepare for the swarm. Sometimes leaders must make difficult choices. But Marcus could feel through their bond that she was troubled too. The casual way he had manipulated entire fleets into conflict disturbed her sense of honor. Yet she also recognized that traditional Veltar methods would have resulted in their capture or death. As they traveled through hyperspace toward a safe harbor, Marcus re-established contact with Earth. The Chaos there had only grown worse in the hours since their last communication. Every major government was demanding answers. Religious leaders were declaring the end times, and panic was spreading through major population centers. General Morrison appeared on the screen again, but this time he was flanked by officials from every major nation on Earth. Dr. Chen, we need more than warnings. If this swarm is really coming, we need help. Technology, weapons, anything you can provide. Marcus looked at Zarathes, who nodded slowly. What they were about to do would change both civilizations forever. We can share our technology, she told Earth's leaders. But you must understand that this will advance your species by thousands of years in a matter of months. Your society will be transformed in ways you cannot imagine. Dr. Harper leaned forward eagerly. What do you need from us? Volunteers, Marcus said. People willing to have their neural patterns modified to interface with our technology. And we need your military leaders to learn completely new ways of thinking about warfare. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Earth's governments were selecting candidates for W. The human volunteers who arrived at the rendezvous point changed everything Marcus thought he knew about his own species. He had expected military officers and scientists, people trained to handle extraordinary situations with calm professionalism. Instead, the first transport ship brought him a jazz musician from New Orleans, a street artist from Tokyo, a kindergarten teacher from Norway, and a comedian from Kenya. I don't understand, Marcus said to General Patricia Hayes, the Earth military liaison who had accompanied the volunteers. We asked for people who could adapt to alien technology and unconventional warfare. These people have no military training. General Hayes smiled, and Marcus could see why Earth's leadership had chosen her for this assignment. She radiated the kind of calm confidence that came from decades of solving impossible problems. Dr. Chen, you've been away from Earth for a month, but the changes there have been remarkable. When we announced that we needed people who could think in ways that computers couldn't predict, we got applications from every walk of life. These volunteers scored highest on the psychological tests we designed, based on your neural patterns. Marcus watched as the volunteers explored the eternal, dawn with wonder and curiosity instead of fear. The jazz musician, James Washington, was already experimenting with the ship's harmonic resonance systems, creating music that seemed to make the crystal walls pulse in rhythm. The street artist, Akiko Tanaka, was sketching the Veltar crew members and asking questions about their four-armed anatomy that even Science Minister Ulaneth found insightful. But it was Dr. Lisa Anderson, the kindergarten teacher, who made the breakthrough that changed the war effort. She was working with Veltar technicians to understand their psychic communication networks when she made an observation that stunned everyone. You're trying to think too hard, she told the Veltar engineers. Children learn to communicate before they understand grammar or logic. They just feel what they want to say and express it. Your psychic networks are the same way. You don't need perfect mental discipline. You need emotional honesty. Within hours, she had taught a dozen human volunteers to interface with Veltar technology, using methods that bypassed years of traditional training. The humans couldn't match the Veltar's psychic precision, but they brought something else too. The network, creativity, intuition, and the ability to make connections that purely logical minds would miss. Marcus felt Zarathus's amazement through their bond, as they watched human Veltar teams working together in ways that neither species could achieve alone. The jazz musician was composing battle hymns that helped Veltar warriors coordinate their movements. The comedian was developing new communication codes that used humor and wordplay to confuse enemy code breakers, but their progress was interrupted when the first swarm scout ship arrived. Marcus was in the engineering section. When the alarm started, the swarm vessel appeared on the edge of the solar system without warning, moving at speeds that should have been impossible for something so large. It looked like a massive insect made of living metal and darkness, bristling with appendages that served unknown purposes. How did it get past our sensor networks? Admiral Kethvar demanded as the crew rushed to battle stations. Science Minister Ulaneth was studying the readings with growing alarm. It didn't come through normal. Space, The energy signature suggests it traveled through what humans might call a wormhole, but one that exists outside conventional physics. Marcus joined Zarathes in the command center, where tactical displays showed the swarm ship's approach. It wasn't moving to attack. Instead, it seemed to be studying them, extending sensor probes that felt uncomfortably like fingers reaching into his mind. It's trying to analyze my neural patterns, Marcus realized. It wants to understand what makes me different. Through his bond with Zarathes, he could feel her protective instincts flaring. But before either of them could act, something unexpected happened. The human volunteers throughout the ship began responding to the swarm's psychic probes in ways that created interference. James Washington started playing a complex jazz improvisation that seemed to scramble the enemy's sensors. Akiko Tanaka began rapid-fire sketching while humming a Japanese folk song, creating visual and auditory patterns that confused the swarm's analysis systems. Dr. Anderson gathered a group of Veltar children in the ship's education center and led them in singing games that generated pure chaos in the psychic spectrum. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The swarm scout ship, overwhelmed by contradictory data it couldn't process, began to retreat. But not before transmitting everything it had learned back to the main swarm fleet. "They know where we are," Zarathes said grimly. "And they know that humans can interfere with their scanning abilities." Marcus studied the sensor readings of the departing scout ship and felt a new understanding forming in his mind. The swarm operated on a hive mind principle, with each individual unit connected to a vast collective intelligence. Their strength came from perfect coordination and shared knowledge. But that same strength created a vulnerability. "What if we could overload their collective consciousness?" he suggested. "If we broadcast enough chaotic information into their network, we might be able to disrupt their coordination." Admiral Kethvar looked skeptical. "The swarm has consumed entire civilizations for millions of years. What makes you think human chaos could succeed where advanced technologies have failed?" Marcus thought about the volunteers exploring the ship, each one approaching alien technology from completely different perspectives, each one creating solutions that no computer could predict. He thought about his sister Sarah, who had somehow convinced Earth's governments to work together despite centuries of conflict. He thought about humanity itself, a species that had evolved cooperation and competition in equal measure, creating a society that was simultaneously unified and anarchic. "Because we're not just chaotic," he said. "We're creatively chaotic. The swarm understands destruction and consumption, but I don't think they understand creation, especially creation that follows no logical pattern." Over the following days, as more swarm scouts probed the edges of the solar system, Marcus and the human volunteers worked with Veltar scientists to develop what they called the Chaos Protocol. It was unlike any weapon ever conceived. Instead of seeking to destroy the enemy, it sought to confuse them so thoroughly that they would become incapable of coordinated action. The protocol combined human creativity with Veltar psychic amplification technology. Musicians composed songs that followed no musical theory but somehow remained beautiful. Artists created visual patterns that satisfied no aesthetic rules but captured the eye. Writers crafted stories that defied narrative logic but still conveyed meaning. Children played games that had no consistent rules but remained fun. All of this creative chaos was then amplified through the Veltar's psychic networks and broadcast across space toward the approaching swarm fleet. The effect was like injecting pure human consciousness directly into a machine intelligence that had never encountered anything like it. But as they prepared for the final confrontation, Marcus received disturbing reports from Earth. The planet was changing in ways that no one had anticipated. Human children were developing mild psychic abilities after exposure to Veltar technology. Artists and musicians were creating works that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Scientists were making discoveries that challenged the fundamental laws of physics. "We're evolving," Dr. Harper reported during one of their communication sessions. "The interaction with Veltar technology is triggering changes in human neural development. It's happening too fast for us to understand all the implications." Marcus felt a chill of responsibility. In trying to save humanity, Had he fundamentally altered what it meant to be human? Through his bond with Zarathes, he sensed her similar concerns about her own people. The Veltar were also changing, becoming more flexible and creative through their contact with humans. But before he could fully process these implications, new alarms sounded throughout the ship. This time, the threat was not from space, but from within. Several Veltar crew members had collapsed simultaneously, their minds overwhelmed by visions of approaching darkness. Science Minister Ulaneth rushed to analyze what had happened. Your Majesty, these crew members were linked to our deep space monitoring network when they collapsed. I believe they have received direct contact from the swarm's collective consciousness. Marcus watched as the affected crew members were taken to the medical bay. Through his bond with Zarathes, he could feel echoes of what they had experienced. The swarm was not just a collection of ships and weapons. It was a living entity that existed partially outside normal space and time, feeding not just on matter and energy, but on consciousness itself. They're not coming to destroy us, he realized with growing horror. They're coming to absorb us. They want to add human creativity and Veltar psychic abilities to their collective. The implications were terrifying. If the swarm succeeded, they would not just consume Earth and the Veltar Empire. They would become something far more dangerous, combining their vast collective intelligence with human unpredictability and Veltar psychic coordination. Zarathes moved. Marcus Chen's eyes opened slowly, and immediately he knew something was wrong. The ceiling above him was not the familiar metal panels of his research station quarters. Instead, he stared at what looked like living crystal that pulsed with soft, blue light. The air smelled different too, carrying hints of something like cinnamon mixed with ozone. He tried to sit up and found his body felt heavy, as if he had been sleeping for days. His clothes were gone, replaced by robes made of material that seemed to shift colors as he moved. But what caught his attention most was the ring on his left hand. He had never seen it before in his life. The metal looked almost alive, with patterns that swirled and changed as he watched. Tiny lights moved through it like fireflies trapped in amber. Marcus swung his legs over the edge of what he now realized was not a bed, but some kind of floating platform. The floor beneath his feet was warm and smooth, made of the same crystal material as the ceiling. Everything in the room curved and flowed like it had grown rather than been built. There were no sharp corners anywhere. A soft chime filled the air, and a section of the wall simply dissolved away. Marcus scrambled backward on the floating platform as a figure walked through the opening. His scientific mind tried to process what he was seeing, but it was unlike anything in Earth's databases. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with skin that shifted between deep purple and silver, depending on how the light hit it. Her face was humanoid but elongated, with large eyes that held flecks of gold. What struck him most were her arms. She had 4 of them, each moving with graceful precision. Her hair, if it could be called hair, looked more like liquid mercury that fell to her shoulders. "You are awake," she said. And Marcus was surprised to understand her perfectly. Her voice had a musical quality, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I was beginning to worry that the bonding process had damaged your neural pathways." Marcus found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "Who are you? Where am I? What bonding process?" The alien woman moved closer, and Marcus noticed she wore robes similar to his own, but hers were more elaborate, with what looked like living jewels embedded in the fabric. "I am Zarathes, Queen of the Veltar Empire. You are in the royal chambers of the flagship Eternal Dawn. As for the bonding process, that is more complicated to explain." Marcus looked down at the ring on his finger again. "This thing just appeared on my hand." "Not appeared," Zarathes corrected gently. "It grew there. It is a manifestation of our bond. According to our laws and traditions, we are now married." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Married? That's impossible. I went to sleep alone in my quarters on Research Station Kepler 442b. I was studying bacterial samples from the planet's North Pole. I have never seen you before in my life." Zarathes tilted her head in what might have been sympathy. "Your species calls it sleep, but your brain activity during this state is unlike anything we have encountered. Most beings either dream in patterns we can predict, or they enter a state of mental silence. Humans do neither. She moved to what looked like a window, though it showed not space but swirling colors that hurt to look at directly. 3 cycles ago, our long-range sensors detected unusual neural emanations from your station. My science advisors insisted we investigate. What we found was a single human mind broadcasting thoughts across subspace without any technological assistance. Marcus stood up, his legs still unsteady. That's impossible. Humans aren't telepathic. Not telepathic in the way my people understand it. Zarathus agreed. But something else entirely. When I attempted to study your sleeping mind using our standard methods, something unprecedented happened. Your neural patterns synchronized with mine, creating a permanent psychic bond. She turned back to face him, and Marcus saw something in her golden eyes that might have been wonder or fear. In 5,000 years of Veltar history, such a bond has only formed between members of our own species, and only when both parties are willing participants. The bond cannot be forced or faked. It is recognition of perfect compatibility at the deepest level of consciousness. Marcus sank back onto the floating platform. This has to be some kind of mistake. I'm just a xenobiologist. I study alien bacteria and write reports that 3 people read. Perhaps that is why it worked, Zarathus said thoughtfully. You approached the unknown without fear or aggression. Your mind was open to possibilities. Most beings we encounter either attack us or try to hide from us. You simply observed and learned. The chime sounded again, and another section of wall dissolved. 3 more aliens entered, these smaller than Zarathus and wearing different colored robes. They spoke, rapidly in a language that sounded like singing mixed with static. Marcus was surprised to find he could understand them as well. Your Majesty, the first one said, its voice higher-pitched than Zarathus. The Council demands an immediate audience. They say the human contamination must be dealt with before it spreads. Zarathus raised one of her 4 hands, and the 3 advisors immediately fell silent. Admiral Kethavar, Science Minister Ulanith, Spiritual Guide Morthus, I present my bonded mate, Marcus Chen of Earth. The 3 aliens stared at Marcus with expressions he could not read. Admiral Kethavar stepped forward, its robe marked with what looked like military insignia. Your Majesty, this creature cannot possibly understand the implications of a royal bond. It is little more than an animal. Marcus felt a flash of anger, and surprisingly, he sensed that Zarathus felt it too. Her skin shifted more towards silver, and when she spoke, her voice carried an edge of authority that made all 3 advisors take a step back. Admiral, you will address my bonded mate with the respect due to his position. The bond has been formed according to our oldest laws. It cannot be broken by choice or force. Science Minister Ulaneth spoke next. But Your Majesty, the genetic incompatibility alone should have prevented any bond formation. This human's biology is carbon-based, primitive, limited to a single, planetary environment. How can such a being serve as consort to the ruler of 17 star systems? Marcus stood up again, steadier now. Maybe because I don't want to rule anything, I just want to understand what's happening to me. The simple honesty of his statement seemed to surprise all 4 aliens. Spiritual Guide Morthus moved closer, studying Marcus with eyes that held ancient wisdom. Tell us, human Marcus, what do you feel through the bond? Marcus closed his eyes and tried to concentrate. Almost immediately he became aware of something that had been there since he woke up, but that he had dismissed as leftover dream sensations. He could feel Zarathus's emotions like a warm current running beneath his own thoughts. But unlike what he might have expected, her mind did not try to control or overwhelm his. Instead, it simply was there, like having a trusted friend standing beside him. I can feel her, he said softly. But she's not trying to change my thoughts or make me do anything. It's like we're 2 separate songs that happen to harmonize perfectly. Morthus made a sound that might have been approval. The human describes the bond more accurately than most of our own people do after decades of study. Admiral Kethavar was not satisfied. This changes nothing. Even if the bond is genuine, the human represents a security risk. 3 enemy empires have already detected the unique energy signature of this unprecedented pairing. They will seek to either capture the human for study or destroy him to prevent us from gaining whatever advantage he might provide. What kind of advantage? Marcus asked. Zarathus looked at him with something that might have been pride. Your mind works in ways that confuse our enemies. They have spent centuries learning to predict Veltar thoughts and actions. But human thoughts follow no patterns they recognize. Already, your presence here has disrupted their long-range planning algorithms. Science Minister Ulaneth activated a device that projected images in the air between them. Marcus saw star charts with moving dots representing fleets and tactical displays that reminded him of the strategy games he used to play as a child. The Crystalline Nexus Collective has repositioned 12 battle groups, Ulaneth reported. The swarm has awakened 3 dormant hive clusters, and the machine hegemony has begun producing war constructs at unprecedented rates, all because they detected the formation of your bond. Marcus stared at the displays. They're mobilizing. Because I exist? Because you represent something new, Zarathus explained. In a galaxy where war has been fought the same way for millennia, change is the most dangerous weapon of all. The implications began to sink in. Marcus thought of Earth, of his colleagues at the research station, of his sister back home who still thought he was studying bacteria on a routine assignment. None of them knew that their quiet xenobiologist had just become the focal point of galactic politics. What happens now? He asked. Zarathus moved to stand beside him, and he felt her emotions more clearly. Determination mixed with fear, hope balanced against uncertainty. Now we learn what it truly means for a human and a Veltar to be bonded, and we discover whether your species' gift for chaos will save us all or destroy everything we have built. Outside the impossible window, the colors swirled faster, and Marcus realized they were not looking at empty space but at the approach of something vast and hostile, drawn by